there's a version of calm that isn't calm at all. It looks like calm, it sounds like calm. The man who has it doesn't raise his voice, he doesn't slam doors, he doesn't send the text at 2 in the morning that he'll regret by 6. He just goes quiet. And for a while, maybe a long while, he thinks he's won something. He thinks, I figured it out. I stopped reacting. I stopped giving them the satisfaction. He sits across from someone, a partner, a friend, his own kid, and he feels nothing. Not peace, not stillness, nothing. I want to talk about that man today because I've met him. Some of you are him, and here's what nobody tells him. The wall he built to protect himself, that wall is now the most dangerous thing in his life, not because it doesn't work, but because it works too well. The lights are on. Nobody's home. He stopped the explosion, but he also stopped everything else. The Stoics had a name for what he lost, and more importantly, they had a practice for getting it back. Not going back to the man who reacted to everything, not tearing the wall down and standing there exposed again, something else entirely, a third way. By the end of this conversation, the word calm is going to mean something different to you than it did 20 minutes ago. Stay with us. My name is Patrick. This is Stoic and Ancient Philosophy. And today, Gary and I are going to walk through one of the most misunderstood ideas in all of Stoic thought, a Greek word that has been mistranslated, misused, and turned into the very thing it was never meant to be. Apatheia.
Not apathy, not numbness, not the wall. Patrick, before we go further, I want to name something. The man you just described. The one sitting in the quiet room, feeling nothing. He didn't fail. He survived. And the mechanism he used, the shutdown, the distance, the wall, that was intelligent. At the time, it was the right response to the wrong situation. The question isn't whether he was wrong to build it. The question is, does he know he's still inside it?
That's the question, isn't it? Because from the inside, it doesn't feel like a wall. It feels like finally being free.
Exactly. And that is precisely where the Stoics become useful. Not as critics, as guides. Because Epictetus, a man who was born a slave, who had no wall to hide behind, no privilege of withdrawal, Epictetus drew a line, a single line that changes everything once you see it. He called it the fundamental distinction. In his Discourses, Book 2, Chapter 5, he asks, what is up to us and what is not? And here is what the wall does, what it always does, eventually. It takes everything, every feeling, every reaction, every moment of genuine connection, and it moves it to the wrong side of that line. The wall doesn't just block pain, it blocks choice, and a man without choice is not free. He is simply managed by a different architect. That is the opposite of Stoicism.
So when we say Stoic emotional detachment, we're not talking about what that man in the quiet room is doing.
No, we're talking about something far more difficult and far more alive.
And that's where we're going right now. Gary, I want to start with the word itself, because I think most men who come to Stoicism, especially men who've been through what we described in that opening, they hear emotional detachment and they think, yes, that's exactly what I want. Distance, control, not being affected. Isn't that the point?
It's the most common misreading of Stoicism there is, and it's understandable, because the word the Stoics used, apatheia, looks like our word apathy, sounds like it. And so the assumption follows. Stoicism teaches you to feel nothing. But that is not what the Stoics meant, not even close. Apatheia, from the Greek apathos, means freedom from destructive passion, not the absence of feeling, the absence of a specific kind of feeling, the kind that hijacks your judgment, the kind that keeps you reactive even when you think you've gone still.
So the man in the quiet room, the one we opened with, he doesn't have apatheia.
No, he has its shadow, suppression dressed up as philosophy. The Stoics drew a line, a taxonomy, between two categories of inner states. On one side, pathos, destructive passions, fear that paralyzes, rage that blinds, grief that becomes a permanent address. These are the states the Stoics wanted to transform, not bury, not deny. Transform. On the other side, Apatheia, healthy emotional states, and this is the part of Stoicism that almost never gets taught.
I'll be honest, I didn't know that word until we started working on this episode.
Most people don't, because the popular version of Stoicism stops at "don't feel bad." The actual Stoics went further. They said, there are emotions worth cultivating. Joy, chara in Greek, not the giddy kind, but a deep, grounded satisfaction in living according to your values. Caution, eulabeia, the considered awareness of what deserves your attention. And alongside these, a category of considered desire, wanting things that are genuinely good, not merely things that feel urgent. These aren't techniques, they are orientations, ways of standing in relation to your own interior life.
But here's what I keep coming back to. He's heard years of someone telling him his feelings were wrong, too much, overreacting, so he learned to shut it down. And now you're telling him the shutdown is also wrong? Isn't that a lot to ask?
It's not a lot to ask. It's the most important distinction he will ever make. Because Epictetus understood something about having no control over circumstances. He was enslaved. He had no guarantee of tomorrow. And yet in the Discourses, in the very first chapter, he draws this line. Some things are up to us, some things are not. Our judgments, our responses, our chosen orientations, up to us. Everything else, not up to us. The man who explodes has handed control of his inner state to whatever just happened. The trigger pulls him. He is not the author of his response, and the man who built the wall. He did the same thing, just in advance. He looked at the risk of feeling and eliminated the choice entirely. Neither man is free. One is pulled into reaction. The other is frozen by a decision he made years ago and never revisited.
So apatheia is what? The ability to choose?
Apatheia is the condition that makes choice possible. The cleared ground. The stillness that isn't absence. It's readiness. A man with apatheia can feel the pull of anger and not be moved by it. He can sit across from someone who once had enormous power over him and remain, as Marcus Aurelius wrote in the Meditations, Book 6, the composed man who keeps numbering the letters, even when the room is full of anger.
And the question every man listening right now is asking, how? How do you get there?
The Stoics had a practice for this. Seneca described it in his letters. Marcus Aurelius lived it every morning before Rome woke up. And it begins. Not in the moment of conflict. It begins before, the night before, or the morning of.
That's where we're going next, and I'll tell you this. What Gary just described is not positive thinking. It is not visualization, it is something older, and in some ways, considerably harder. Stay with us.
Let me tell you what Marcus Aurelius did every morning. Before the dispatches arrived, before the Senate, before Rome made its demands on him, he sat And he spoke to himself, not affirmations, not gratitude lists. He named the people who would frustrate him that day. The ungrateful, the arrogant, the deceitful. He named them, and he chose his response in advance. He wrote it down in the Meditations, Book 2. Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, the arrogant, the deceitful, not as a complaint, as a preparation.
That's not what I expected. That sounds almost pessimistic.
It sounds pessimistic. It operates as the opposite. Because the man who walks into his day expecting ease and then meets difficulty is ambushed. His reaction is improvised, and improvised reactions, in moments of genuine provocation, almost never reflect the man he wants to be. But the man who has already stood in that room, in his mind that morning, and chosen how he will respond, he is not ambushed. The moment arrives, and something in him recognizes it. I have been here before. I know what I do here.
So it's rehearsal, literally.
Literally. Seneca described the same practice in De Ira, on anger, Book 3. His argument was this: anger is not cured in the moment of anger. By then, it's too late. The work happens before. You study the terrain before the battle. You walk the ground. He wasn't asking men to live in dread. He was asking them to remove the element of surprise, because surprise is what turns a feeling into a reaction. Strip away the surprise, and what remains is a gap, a fraction of a second between the stimulus and the response. And everything lives in that gap.
Okay, but I want to push back here because I think a lot of men listening are going to feel this. Isn't this just rumination with better branding? Aren't we telling men to spend their mornings rehearsing conflict? Because I know men who do that, and it doesn't make them calmer. It makes them more wound up.
That's the right question. And the distinction matters. Rumination circles. It revisits the same wound, the same injustice, the same conversation, and it arrives nowhere. It is a loop with no exit. What Seneca and Marcus Aurelius described is different in one fundamental way. It ends. You walk into the difficult scenario, you choose your response, and you close it. The rehearsal has a conclusion. You are not reliving, you are preparing. One moves backward, the other faces forward.
So the question to ask yourself is, am I preparing or am I replaying?
Precisely. And a man coming out of a long period of emotional chaos, he knows the difference in his body if he pays attention. Rumination has a particular weight to it, a tightness. The rehearsal, done correctly, has the opposite quality. It produces something closer to steadiness. The Zen tradition has a word for this state, mushin, literally, no mind, not emptiness, readiness. The trained martial artist doesn't think during the confrontation. He has already thought. The movement arrives not from calculation, but from preparation so deep it has become instinct. Two traditions, separated by centuries and continents, arriving at the same place.
The prepared man doesn't react, he responds.
And there is a world of difference between those two words. React, and you are the instrument of whatever just happened to you. Respond, and you are its author.
So the practice begins in the morning, before the day has a chance to ambush you. But Gary, what about the moment itself? What about when the text arrives, or the door opens, or the voice comes with that particular tone, and the chest tightens and the thumb hovers? What does a man do in that moment?
The Stoics had a name for what happens in that gap, and it is not willpower, it is not discipline in the way most men understand discipline. It is a philosophical act, one the Stoics borrowed from an older tradition and sharpened into something a man can use on a Tuesday morning, in a kitchen, when everything in him wants to either explode or disappear.
That's next. And I mean it when I say, this one changes the way you move through a difficult conversation. Stay with us.
Last week, Seneca told us, recede in the ips, withdraw into yourself. Epistulae Moralis, Letter 7. Today, we ask the next question. Once you're inside, what do you do there?
That's the question I've been sitting with since we recorded episode 1, because I think a lot of men know how to go quiet. They've gotten very good at it, but quiet and grounded, those are not the same thing.
They are not. And the 3 practices I want to walk through today, they are not techniques for going quieter. They are practices for going deeper. There is a difference. Quiet is absence. Grounded is presence. That difference, that's the whole episode. Practice 1. The Morning Rehearsal. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, Book 2. Before Rome woke up, before the first dispatch arrived, he named what was coming, not to dread it, to meet it already standing. The practice, 90 seconds, before the phone, before the news, before the day makes its first demand on you. You name one scenario, one, that may pull you today. A conversation you've been avoiding, a message that might arrive, a person whose voice alone changes the temperature of a room. You walk into it, in your mind, you feel the pull, and you choose, in advance, how the man you want to be responds. Not the man who explodes, not the man behind the wall, the man who keeps numbering the letters. 90 seconds. That is the entire practice. The Stoics did not believe in elaborate rituals. They believed in daily precision.
And this is what you meant. So when you said the rehearsal ends, it has a conclusion. You walk in, you choose, you walk out.
Exactly. It is not rumination. It is preparation with a closed door. Practice 2. The Pause Protocol, Epoche. Now, the curtain goes up, the moment arrives, the text, the tone of voice, the particular silence that carries more weight than any word. The chest tightens, the thumb hovers. This is where the Stoics borrowed from an older tradition. And here I want to close the loop I left open a few minutes ago. Seneca, in De Ira, on Anger, Book 3, Chapter 36, describes an evening practice of self-examination. He attributes it to Sextius, a Roman philosopher who drew directly from Pythagorean tradition. The Pythagoreans practiced deliberate reflection, not as weakness, but as discipline. The Stoics took that instinct and sharpened it into a specific act. They called it epoche, the suspension of the first impression. In practice, it is one breath, one deliberate beat between stimulus and response, not hesitation, not weakness, a philosophical act, the act of a man who has decided that his responses belong to him, not to whatever just walked into the room.
One breath.
One breath. Chosen. Deliberate. That is the entire gap. And in that gap, you are free. Practice 3. The naming practice. Apatheia. The Stoics made a distinction I mentioned earlier, the Apatheia, healthy orientations. But naming the category is one thing. Practice 3 is about naming your own. Joy that is grounded, not performed. Caution that is considered, not fearful. Desire that is genuine, not reactive. A man coming out of a long period of emotional noise has often lost the vocabulary for these states. He knows rage. He knows numbness. He has forgotten the names for what lives between them. The practice. Once a day. Not in the morning, not as a task. At some point in the day, you notice one of these states, and you name it. Not performed, not forced, noticed, named, claimed as yours. The Stoics were not asking you to feel differently. They were asking you to see more precisely, to name what is already there. Because a man who cannot name his own interior states cannot choose them.
And that's the through line, isn't it? All three practices, the rehearsal, the pause, the naming, they're all about the same thing: authorship.
Authorship. Yes. The man who rehearses his morning, he is writing the first draft of his day. The man who pauses in the gap, he is editing before he publishes. The man who names what he feels, he is signing his name to his own interior life. Seneca's very first letter, the first word he wrote to Lucilius. Vindica te tibi. Reclaim yourself, for yourself.
That's the whole thing, isn't it?
That's the whole thing. Next week, because once a man has found his inner citadel, the question isn't how to protect it. The question is, what does that man look like to the world?
That's next Friday. We'll see you there.
If this conversation reached something in you today, share it with one man who needs it. Not a crowd, one man. That's enough.